Bye-bye now.
Thank you, Tomas. That's been the ABC's One Talk program there for our listeners in Melanesia. You're listening here now to RNZ Pacific.
RNZ Pacific, Nissan Bulavanaka with Pacific Regional News. I'm Dominic Godfrey. Indonesia's government says there's calm in the West Papua Regency where 2 protesters and a soldier were killed on Wednesday. The death toll in Deie, which activists say is much worse than reported, marks a deadly escalation of protests taking place across Papua. Mackenzie Smith reports.
According to police and Indonesia's foreign ministry, armed protesters attacked security forces on Wednesday with machetes and arrows. They say 1 soldier and 2 protesters were killed, one of whom died of arrow wounds. Local media have reported 6 protesters were shot dead by soldiers, but the government has rejected these accounts. In a statement on Thursday, the Foreign Ministry said the situation in Deie had returned to normal. However, a government-imposed internet block has made verifying reports difficult. And according to lawyer Veronica Korman, the mobile phone network in Deie was disabled on Wednesday. This is Mackenzie Smith.
Bougainville's president says the final outcome of the upcoming independence referendum must be negotiated. John Momas addressed Papua New Guinea's National Parliament today on issues pertaining to November's referendum in Bougainville. PNG's Parliament would have the final say on what eventuates following the referendum result. But Mr. Momas said time would be needed following the plebiscite for Bougainville and PNG to negotiate over what happens next. He stressed that there would have to be give and take on both sides.
For many Bougainvilleans, it has been a shock to find that the peace agreement does not provide for the votes in the referendum to be binding. But that is what was negotiated in the peace agreement. The people will need to be prepared for a negotiated outcome.
John Momas says the essence of what his people want is empowerment of the Bougainville government to manage its own affairs. Vanuatu's Prime Minister Charlo Salwai has written to the Clerk of Parliament to summon MPs to elect a new Speaker. The government is looking to replace the current Speaker, Esmond Simon, and second Deputy Speaker, Tuara Daniel, both Vanua Aku Party MPs. The Daily Post reports Mr Simon has confirmed the notice has been dispatched to all MPs to convene on Tuesday, the 3rd of September. This is in response to Mr Salwai's request for an extraordinary session of Parliament, including a special session to deal with the motion to replace him. The President of Kiribati says he's frustrated at the lack of leadership and indifference shown to the plight of countries vulnerable to climate change. Tanes Maamau says his concern stems from Australia's lack of commitment in eliminating coal production at the recent Pacific Islands Forum Summit in Tuvalu. Jamie Tahana reports.
The President says that having faced the climate crisis for a long time, Kiribati's people support efforts to strengthen adaptation and resilience so they can stay and safeguard their country's sovereignty. Mr Marmo says a focus on building the adaptive capacity of the Kiribati has raised doubts from the international community. But he says the science behind the sinking narrative is uncertain, and Kiribati is doing all it can to ensure its people prosper as they continue to fight climate change. President Marmo is attending the UN General Assembly to raise the plight of atoll nations and the ambitions of vulnerable islands like Kiribati. Ko Jamie Tahana, TNA.
Fiji's government says it's working towards strengthening the economic empowerment of women in the country. Director for Women, Selai Korovusere, says Fijian women need to start contributing more towards community development. With an increase in domestic violence cases across Fiji, she says this can help the women to move out of their abusive relationships. Ms. Korovusere says the ministry wants to improve its work in eliminating violence against women and fostering women's economic empowerment.
It's an opportunity for women to be able to walk out of violent situations where they remain with the perpetrators because they cannot support themselves. So as we empower women in this economic empowerment, they can make decisions for themselves.
Fiji's Director for Women, Selai Korovusere. A refugee advocate says the rapidly declining state of health of people held by Australia in offshore detention is due to 6 years of grave neglect by authorities. David Mann of Refugee Legal was speaking at Australia's Senate as Australia's Senate conducts an inquiry into a Medivac law introduced in March. The law makes it easier for doctors to order medical evacuation to Australia of sick refugees and asylum seekers held offshore. Australia's government claims the law has encouraged self-harm incidents among inmates looking to escape detention. Mr. Mann says this claim is baseless and that the law is vital if Australia is to meet its obligations to the people it detains.
See, the critical issue here is that healthcare is best decided by those with medical expertise and not, as happened in the past, before these laws, by bureaucrats and politicians. I mean, that's the focus and effect of the Medivac laws, to place into the hands of those with medical expertise the assessment about medical need.
Refugee advocate David Mann. New Zealand's Ministry of Health has issued a travel warning for Auckland over the current measles outbreak. Authorities are urging people travelling to and from Auckland, particularly Pacific regional connections, to make sure they're vaccinated. Jenny Meyer reports.
In a tweet issued yesterday afternoon, the ministry said people travelling to Auckland should be immunised against measles before they travel. It says babies travelling and living in Auckland should be vaccinated at 12 months of age and at least 2 weeks before travelling to allow their immunity to develop. Auckland Regional Public Health says there have been 700 confirmed cases of measles this year. It cautions that measles is a highly infectious viral illness. Authorities are also asking people who think they may have measles to phone ahead of seeing a doctor, as they could potentially infect others. This is Jenny Meyer.
Samoa's police chief has dismissed reports that a fourth person has been arrested in connection with an alleged plot to assassinate the Prime Minister. Earlier this month, police arrested and charged 3 suspects over the alleged plot to kill Tuila Epa Sailele Mariele Ngaoi. This week, Newsline Samoa reported that police had arrested a 4th suspect, but Police Commissioner Fuya Vailili Ivan Kyle says this is not true. Meanwhile, Fuya Vailili told KHJ News that it was a Matai of Lauli'i village, where one of the 3 defendants lives, who alerted police about the plot.
We were very grateful for that village who actually reported it to the police and allowed us to act on it. And it could have been the other way too, that they don't report it or they report it and the police sits on it. And that's unacceptable too. Any threat against the leader of the country is a threat against the whole country.
Samoa's Police Commissioner Fuiavailili Igon Kyle. 20 Fijians left the country today to work in meat processing plants in Australia under Australia's Pacific Labour Scheme. Fiji joined the scheme in April this year. Under the scheme, the Fijians can work in Australia for up to 3 years. The Fijian government says other sectors such as aged care, hospitality and agriculture are being explored for employment of Fijians under the scheme. And that's the latest Pacific Regional News from RNZ Pacific.
This is Dateline Pacific from RNZ Pacific. I'm Don Wiseman. Just up today, more deaths after violence following a rally in West Papua. Why Australia's Medivac law must stay in place, we hear from a refugee advocate. New Zealand recognises young Pacific leaders. Pacifica parents are encouraged to get their children reading from a young age. And a heavy metal band from the Solomons bucks the trend of island reggae. Indonesian police say 1 soldier and 2 protesters have been killed in West Papua after shooting broke out at a rally on Wednesday. But activists and other witnesses have told local media at least 6 Papuans died in the clash in Niue Regency and several others were injured. Spoke to our reporter Mackenzie Smith, who's been following the events, and asked him how the violence broke out.
So the official narrative from Indonesia's government is that a protest in Dayai turned violent on Wednesday when more than 1,000 Papuans armed with machetes and bow and arrow attacked military and police there. And according to police, one soldier was killed and 2 protesters also killed, one of whom they've claimed was by an arrow from their own side. But that's not what local media and activists say. They've reported at least 6 deaths of protesters and also several injuries suffered among those. The news site Suara Papua said security forces fired on the protesters who were there peacefully demonstrating. And the local deputy regent, Hengki Pigai, told Reuters there were an unknown number of civilians killed. Indonesia's foreign ministry also issued a statement this afternoon saying the situation in Dayai had returned to normal, but the statement echoed the police and saying security forces were restrained in their responses and were only provoked by what they say were violent protesters.
So why is this information so hard to verify?
Well, Papua is incredibly remote and a lot of people don't have phone or internet access there. But amid these widespread protests that have happened there over the past 2 weeks, Indonesia's government has blocked internet access to stop what it says is the flow of disinformation. Critics say that's made it really hard to verify human rights abuses that could be happening there by the state. And according to a human rights lawyer, Veronica Korman, after this attack in Dayai on Wednesday, the government also blocked the mobile phone network in the area. Indonesia's military and police have also repeatedly called news reports, including the one from Reuters, a hoax. So it's really hard to verify the extent of what's happened, even from local news sources.
What is behind these latest tensions in Papua?
Well, although these are the first reported deaths as part of these protests, they've been escalating across Papua for the past 2 weeks. It all started when several Papuan students in the Japanese city of Surabaya were called monkeys. They were tear-gassed and then arrested by Indonesia's military. And when news broke of this, a lot of Papuans were incensed, and thousands have been marching in anti-racism rallies across several major cities in Indonesia since then. Dozens have been arrested, but they've really shown no signs of letting up. And just this week, this movement has also added demands for an independence referendum to their cause. The governor of Papua province, Lukas Nmb, met with the president, Joko Widodo, on Tuesday and said the president was willing to talk about this, but observers say that would be political suicide for Widodo.
That's Mackenzie Smith. A refugee advocate says the rapidly declining state of health of people held by Australia in offshore detention is due to 6 years of grave neglect by authorities. David Mann of Refugee Legal is speaking as Australia's Senate conducts an inquiry into a Medevac law introduced in March. The law makes it easier for doctors to order medical evacuation to Australia of sick refugees and asylum seekers held offshore. Australia's government claims the law has encouraged self-harm incidents among inmates looking to escape detention. Mr. Mann told me the claim is baseless.
I think the first point to make here is that the dangerous deterioration of the health conditions of men and women held for over 6 years on Nauru and in PNG has been caused by 6 years of inhumane and degrading limbo and grave medical neglect, not by these recent Medevac laws to better respond to what is a crisis.
Will Home Affairs manage to cut through with the Senate on this argument?
It's very difficult to predict, but there's been wide-ranging and powerful and consistent evidence presented to this Senate inquiry to this effect, that the laws, these new Medevac laws, have proven to be a critical and necessary mechanism to ensure that the urgent medical needs of men and women for evacuation are properly identified and met, and that the Australian government is able to act on expert medical advice to meet its duty of care to seriously unwell people on Manus and Nauru. See, the critical issue here is that healthcare is best decided by those with medical expertise and not, as happened in the past, before these laws, by bureaucrats and politicians. And that's the focus and effect of the Medivac laws, to place into the hands of those with medical expertise the assessment about medical need, rather than that decision being made by bureaucrats and politicians. So I think it's fair to say that in general, if anyone turns up at a hospital or to a medical surgery wanting a medical assessment, they would prefer that medical assessment to be made by those with expertise, by doctors, rather than by a hospital administrator or a local politician. So this is really what the issue what's at stake here is how do we, what is the best mechanism to ensure that the duty of care that Australia has, quite clearly has, toward people that it has exiled to Nauru and PNG, people who sought asylum and most of whom are refugees. The question is, what is the best mechanism to properly identify the medical needs in the context of what is a serious crisis in relation to their health, where there is vast amounts of evidence of a very dangerous and deteriorating situation in relation to the health of many people.
On that subject, we have, in the last several weeks, had a significant number of people move to a new facility next door to the Bomana jail in Port Moresby, and there are questions about the state of their care. You can't get access.
Well, there are two different situations that we're talking about here. One is people who are in the community, who are not in detention at the moment, who are either already in Port Moresby and are living within the community in Port Moresby, and those that are being offered now to move from Manus Island in PNG to Port Moresby, to the capital city. And the offer to those people recently was to people who have been recognised as refugees, who are still in limbo because Australia won't take them back and because they're awaiting somewhere in the world to be resettled. But in the meantime, they have been offered to move from Manus Island to Port Moresby to live freely in the community. While that is preferred, it appears to be for many a preferable option in the short term. What it doesn't do in any respect is address the fundamental question at stake, and that is when and where will these people who are refugees be resettled so that they can rebuild their lives in safety. What we know is that PNG is not a country that can provide either a safe or adequate form of enduring protection. It is not a place where refugees can resettle safely, and so somewhere else in the world people need to be resettled somewhere else where they can be safe and secure and rebuild their lives. So all it is really is, for many, it appears a preferable short-term option. So there are some other people who have been refused asylum but are wanting a review of their cases, who have, out of the blue, been taken from the community in Port Moresby and have been incarcerated in the immigration detention facility in Bomana, not because of any alleged wrongdoing in terms of any criminal offence or anything, but out of the blue, without any proper explanation, they have been detained in the Bomana immigration facility, and it is a matter of profound concern. Over 50 men remain incarcerated, apparently indefinitely, and without any proper reasons provided for why, out of the blue, this has occurred in a country where I note that they were taken to against their will, where they are still seeking asylum and seeking review of their case, and where, in a country that has a constitutional Bill of Rights guaranteeing the right to live.
Has there been any contact at all with these people in Bomana?
We actually asked some of the men, not all of the men, but some of the men who are being held in Bomana. Currently, we're experiencing serious difficulties with communication. A number of the men detained we have had contact with previously when they've been detained, including when they've been transferred back to the hospital for urgent medical treatment. We're extremely concerned about their situation. It's a matter of profound concern that they have been detained. Many of these men are experiencing very serious health conditions. The detention puts them at even further risk and is creating additional concerns of an acute nature about their medical treatment and medical needs. It's a very dangerous situation.
That's David Mann at Refugee Legal. New Zealand's recognised young Pacific leaders this week with the Prime Minister's Pacific Youth Awards at a ceremony at Parliament in Wellington. The awards acknowledge contributions from a broad swathe of fields, including academia, science, community and business. Dominic Godfrey has more.
11 young Pacific people were recognised for their leadership and contributions to scholarship, community, leadership, arts and creativity, language and culture, the STEM subjects of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, as well as business. The Prime Minister herself thanked the families and support crews of the recipients that nurtured them to their places of leadership. Jacinda Ardern thanked the young leaders for their honest approaches in their respective fields.
Because we are in a really difficult time in our global lives. We've been challenged in ways that we haven't as a global community been challenged before, whether it's our fractured society, whether it's inequality, whether it's mental health, or whether it's climate change. And young people don't shy away from that brutal reality.
Etaroa Lefaile received her award for STEM. The Samoan Wellingtonian spends her workdays in Auckland but comes home to see her parents every second weekend. Her leadership focus is in technology.
Currently I'm a junior software engineer and a community manager at a startup company called Voluntarily. So I've been involved in it since uni, which was 2014.
The 23-year-old says her work stands to benefit the emerging Pasifika generation in Aotearoa.
The work that I'm doing now is for a platform that is built for next year. In 2020, the new digital technology curriculum is coming in. But the problem is teachers don't know how to teach the new computer science stuff. So this platform that we're building is helping not only the wider of New Zealand, but especially for our Pasifika generation coming up.
Alexia Helbertitu won the Business and Entrepreneurship Award. At 16, the Samoan Greek New Zealander was the only non-male in her digital technology class. At 17, the only female in her advanced physics class. And now at 20, founded and leads Girl Boss New Zealand, which is dedicated to advancing women in leadership. The social enterprise has a 12,500-strong community.
The demographic of our members are the demographic of our people who are spread across the Pacific, are united by their commitment to use their God-given talents to make a positive impact on the world. For New Zealand to reach its full potential, both men and women must reach their full potential.
New Zealand's Minister for Pacific Peoples says all the recipients represent a new generation of Pasifika leadership. Albito William-Seo says these modern-day Pacific explorers and navigators in the global digital economy need to be nurtured and encouraged, and he's confident of their commitment to the country and the region.
There's a real passion and a desire for all of these young people to play their role for not just the needs of Aotearoa New Zealand, but also to play their role as peoples of the vast blue continent that the Pacific leaders refer to often.
In her closing remarks, the Prime Minister acknowledged the recipients for their leadership now and into the future.
You keep me motivated. You keep me going. You give me hope. You make me feel like I'm never doing this job alone. You're right there alongside everyone who is fighting to make things a bit different and a bit better for those who go before them.
The recipients represented a wide variety of Pacific heritages and came from across New Zealand. This is Dominic Godfrey.
A senior tutor at the University of Waikato is urging Pacifica parents to encourage and promote literacy earlier in the home, prepare their children for tertiary study. Mary Taito says many Pacifica University students struggle to grasp the concept of concise writing. Ms. Taito, who's also a Ratuman poet, says many students find it difficult to read academic articles once they get to university. She had told Christine Ravoy the students, who are mainly second language speakers, haven't read enough early enough.
You need to promote that at a very, very young age, and I know that that's already happening with practicals, and I think we need to do a lot more of that. We need to take poetry, creative writing, reading, literacy, and promote it in our communities. And yes, the literature says that Pacific Island families are not literate reading families, but that's changing. We are becoming more literate. We are now getting our children to read, and I'd like to see that happening more. I'd like to see literacy being promoted more in the home, especially in the home, to encourage our children to actually read. That's the foundation for learning. Learning comes from reading. Writing comes from reading. The foundation of writing is actually reading. And if you're trying to write without the foundation of reading, it is very difficult.
What else needs to happen?
We should be reading a lot more. We should be promoting reading at home. We should be promoting reading hours at home. Quiet reading at home. I mean, look at us Pacific Islanders. We have this funeral to go to. We have this church activity to go to. We have this thing to go to. And then we have all those cultural commitments. But I think we need to do more with reading and literacy at home.
How do we encourage or get our young people to read?
Well, first of all, we need to model that behavior at home. And parents need to model that behavior at home. And I know that's a tough part. But if your children see you reading, if your children see you value a book, and you demonstrate that behavior at home, we could start there. And start them young. When they're 2 or 3, read to them before they go to bed. Buy them books, second-hand books, take them to the library. You don't need to pay to get library books out. The library's free. Have a day out where you can have a family trip out to the library. Be creative. Think of things like that. And then you've got these programs in schools that encourage reading and literacy, so expose them to that.
It's academic meditato. The heavy metal band from the Solomon Islands is bucking the trend of island reggae dominance in the Melanesian country. The Sons of Solomon, who released their latest single this year, are leading the charge of talented young musicians, bucking the common misconception that islanders only like reggae, hip-hop and R&B and gospel music. Karoy Hawkins travelled to the Solomons earlier this year for the national elections, and while there, met up with the band.
That opening from New Beginning, the Sons of Solomon's latest single, is not what most Pacific music fans today would associate with Solomon Islands music. But lead guitarist Floyd Profela says at the turn of the century, rock and heavy metal was all the rage in the country.
When we started this band, that was the whole intention behind it, for the promotion of heavy metal music. Like I said in the past, metal music used to be like the mainstream genre, and now I see that changed over time.
Can change over time. Solid Black, Box Boys, Sound Temple, Black Centipede and Red Star Unit about some of the household band names of the Solomon Islands rock and heavy metal heydays. But the introduction of electronic music production software has changed the Solomon Islands music scene in a big way. Today, if you search Solomon Islands music online, you're more likely to find artists like Doorman's Project, White Sox, and Jaro Local, who won the Best International Artist Award at this year's Pacific Music Awards in Auckland. The regional and international success of these local artists in this space have earned the country its own music genre, Solomon Islands reggae. But Sons of Solomon's lead guitarist Floyd Profela says based on the positive feedback they got after releasing their first single, Follow, he believes there is still a big heavy metal fan base in the country.
Metal music? For me, I just like metal music. It also has a part to play in the whole industry in Solomon Islands, so we just want to complement Solomon Islands music as a whole and be part of the Solomon Islands music industry as well.
Kofara, who does the clean vocals for Sons of Solomon's, has lived and played in heavy metal bands in Papua New Guinea, and he says all across Melanesia he has met fans who follow the country's small but vibrant metal scene.
I think in all the Melanesian countries, the Solomons is the centre of heavy metal. Because of the British influence, even way back when rock and roll was popular in Solomon Islands, up until the era of the likes of Shazi and other island artists, then it started to die out. But how I see it, there are still a lot of people who love heavy metal in Solomon Islands.
The group was brought together and is produced by Solomon Maneoru of Cockroach Records, who has big plans for Solomon Islands music.
I want a band or a few of our bands to develop a global audience so that we can have fans out there as well, so that we can join the big shows outside. For example, Bloodstock. At least one day our bands must go to these kinds of shows.
Mr. Maneoru, who trained as a sound engineer at Sydney's JMC Academy, is currently working with the Sons of Solomon on a music video for their latest single, New Beginning. He says next year they are hoping to release their first EP. This is Karoy Hawkins.
And that is Dateline Pacific from RNZ Pacific. Thanks for joining us. I'm Don Wiseman. Until next time, Mesa Multi.
Proudly brought to you by Digicel Vanuatu.
In the headlines, senior veterinarian wants domestic warfare area key for marine mammal safety. Beetles on Santo and MI, likely not coconut rhinoceros beetles. Biosecurity Department broken into for the second time this year. Traffic collisions showing upward trend since 2016. And Minister says investigation into misuse will determine appropriate action. Welcome to the Vanuatu Nightly News on 96.3 Buzz FM with me, Charles Hakwa. Leading our news this evening, Port Vila UMP latest meeting outcome was unconstitutional. All the resolutions for UMP Port Vila region held at Vau Community at Freshwater 3 has been ruled null and void. The president of UMP Port Vila region, Alec George Noel, made the above statement in a letter to all Port Vila UMP area presidents dated on the 26th of August. Mr. Alec Noel says the executive regional meeting that was called by the Port Vila UMP Secretary General, Donald Palaud, on the 24th of August is unconstitutional and null and void. According to Chapter 15, Article 42 of UMP Constitution, it stipulates that a meeting of a regional congress may call by the president of the council at the request of the majority of members of the regional council or 2/3 of the representatives. Daily Post contacted Secretary General Palau and confirmed that the meeting was called for the party president, Serge Vaho, to make awareness and talk about developments within the party itself. During that particular meeting last weekend, they elected a new executive for Port Vila region headed by Johnson Capi, Vice President Olivier Etul, Secretary Donald Palau, Vice Secretary Sergio Tari, Treasurer Yamak Samuel Yani, Vice Treasurer Rose, and they are all member presidents of the 5 wards of Port Vila. Also, the meeting resulted with nominees for the next upcoming general election 2020, which are Ishmael Kalsakau, Wendy Himford, Anthony Yauko, Municipal Councillor, and Sabina Tonga. All of the above outcomes of the meeting were unconstitutional, says President Alec Noel. UMP Vice President, at the same time Leader of Opposition, Ishmael Kalsakau, confirms that he was not aware of the meeting and yet all the meeting resolutions were unconstitutional. Senior Veterinary Officer at the Department of Biosecurity, Dr. Roger Phillips, has voiced his concern about coastal pollution that is destroying marine life, especially at the temporary domestic wharves being used by domestic vessels at Ifira Wharf.
Yes, I was down there on a personal matter several weeks ago. I was quite astounded by the amount of pollution surrounding the ships and coming ashore around at the point there, around near the boatyard towards the ships. Extensive amounts of plastic, large pieces of plastic, not just small plastic bags, but extensive plastic wrapping that is just lapping up against the shore, which of course is a concern for I think everybody, but of course our marine life, especially turtles, mistakenly think this is this plastic is jellyfish. It clogs up their digestive systems, and of course then they die, including other creatures such as especially whales and other creatures of the sea.
He says it is a mistreatment of the animal's environment. Dr. Roger says there is a concern for the welfare of animals.
There is a turtle Conservation and regulations in the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, preventing removal of turtle eggs and conservation of turtles in general. So in this way, this is a direct contravention of that because those pollutants are there. So surely I would expect those in charge of the wharf down there to maintain the cleanliness, get some divers in there, and please arrange with the municipal to remove the rubbish to correct place into landfill.
A few months ago, dead fish were seen washed ashore at the same area. He said there is very little in Vanuatu laws to punish responsible people for the death of marine life.
Well, I definitely think the authority down there must make actions to utilise some of the money that is generated by the mooring of those ships there to reinvest it in the marine resource and just to clean that area. it's quite unbelievable the amount of pollution sent there, also onshore. But of course that then blows into the sea, and surely the young children there are able to appreciate a swim in the sea there, but the swimmer makes all that debris and dirty is not very healthy at all.
That was Dr. Roger Phillips, Senior Veterinary Officer of Biosecurity Vanuatu. A preliminary report from the Pacific community shows that it may be likely that the beetles reported to be present on MI and Santo Islands are endemic to Vanuatu and not the dreaded coconut rhinoceros beetle. This finding still needs to be verified by laboratories in Australia, said the Director General of the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Forestry, Fisheries and Biosecurity, Moses Amos. DG Amos says the climate after Cyclone Pam might have caused the beetles to behave aggressively. He says beetles may have run short of what they normally eat and go beyond their boundaries to attack and feed on the young coconut shoots and leaves in the areas. Director General Amos conveyed that the local beetle is likely of the same family of coconut rhinoceros beetles, but it is not quite the same type as that found in Mangaliliu because the size is bigger and almost 3 times the size of a normal coconut rhinoceros beetle. In other news, the Department of Biosecurity has had its office broken into last night for the second time this year. The first break-in was 2 weeks ago. Acting Director of Biosecurity, Ms. Leisongi Manses, says the thieves may have been looking for cash.
By the look of things, I think they're just after cash money. They're just looking for money because some of the assets like laptops and things like that are just intact. They're not being touched. They just walked out with a cash box that was actually empty. And then they went out with a crowbar and tried to open it, but and then they found nothing in it. So yeah, I think they were just after cash money. They're looking for cash money.
Tools such as drills and circular saw belonging to a carpenter that is extending the plant health laboratory were stolen during the break-in.
I'm appealing to anyone that if someone wants to sell you some of these working tools, I think it would be best that you ask them where they get the tools from, and some of them would be selling it so cheap. So maybe ask them why they're selling it so cheap and where they get it from.
Ms. Manses says there is a security fence, but no security personnel present each night. She confirms police have been contacted and are now investigating.
Yes, we came around this morning and we called the police, and an officer is there now at the moment to give them a report. And then they will come out and do whatever they have to come and do here.
The acting director stresses that the department's role is very important for the country.
The department has a role of protecting our country from pests and diseases. As most of us will be aware, we are at the moment dealing with the incursion of CRP. And then with this break-in, it has slowed us down a little bit today. We have to wait for police to come and do the investigation before we can go in and do some of the work that we're supposed to do. But yeah, being an important department, it's very important that the police should have come earlier to come and do the investigation and then go out before we can start with our job for the day.
That was Leisongi Manses, the acting director of Biosecurity Vanuatu. Traffic collisions have increased over the last 3 years, according to the Vanuatu Police Traffic Units. In 2016, there were 308 collisions. The number increased to 322 in 2017. Police recorded a slight increase in 2018 to 328. In 2019, from January to August last week, police recorded a total of 217 collisions. The figures are alarming, and police have expressed concerns that the number could increase if people continue to ignore their advice. Police point out that there are a lot of accidents that are due to drivers being inexperienced on the road. Another contributing factor to road accidents is engineering works and road designs, as it was alleged. But the Port Vila Project Management Unit has disputed this statement, saying that the recent fatal accident in Port Vila near Rapid Electric was a result of intoxication from alcohol. And finally, the Minister of Education and Training has condemned the misuse of its vehicles by one of its officers, saying his ministry is taking the issue seriously. Minister Jean-Pierre Nirua states in a statement released yesterday afternoon, The Ministry of Education's G1270 vehicle was found on the west coast of Efate, stranded on the beach. Photos of the vehicle went viral on social media over the weekend. Nirua says the incident is currently being investigated by the Public Service Commission, who will be gathering all the details surrounding the alleged misuse. He says once facts are collected, the government will take appropriate action. And this brings us to the end of the Vanuatu Nightly News on 96.3 Buzz FM. I'm Charles Hakwa. Have a pleasant evening.
And that was the Nightly News, proudly brought to you by Digicel Vanuatu.
Over the last decade, she's been involved in films including Vibe, Moana and The Orator, and set up a successful casting company, all while teaching at the National University of Samoa. Actor, writer and director Fiona Collins is now back in Aotearoa, living in Rotorua. She's about to show New Zealand audiences her contemporary family drama Alofa, that premiered in Samoa and Western Samoa. In the play, eldest son Nico returns home to Samoa after being away for more than 25 years to attend the funeral of the family matriarch, Alofa. Once reunited, though, the family is forced to face the consequences of long-held secrets and lies. Alofa was first performed in 2016 in Samoa. With very few changes, it's about to go on stage here. Fiona says living in Samoa for a decade wasn't planned.
I went over in 2009 for the Artist in Residence, Creative New Zealand, in collaboration with the National University of Samoa. And then I kind of just stayed. I was there for almost 10 years.
Well, how has it been coming home?
It's been really hard, I'm not going to lie. Just things like the weather. It just changed my whole life, living in Samoa and being... I just felt at home. You know, I went over in my 40s and, really found groundedness and... Yeah, that was an amazing time, and it's been quite hard being back. Everything's a different climates. However, I've adjusted to living back in Rotorua, and I am really close with my granddaughters. I've got 2 baby granddaughters who are just my heart. My daughter is amazing, my sons. It's nice to come home and reconnect with my children and my family, and it's also been really amazing to come back and just work. It's quite hard to work over there in our industry.
I wondered about that. I mean, over 10 years, really. I'm sure it has had a profound impact on your work. But why so tough?
The style of theatre we do here doesn't fit there, really. We have our own sort of entertainment, storytelling styles in the Pacific and specifically in Samoa. So I guess I went into the university as a performing arts lecturer, and then I just started working with the students. Completely different culture, different language. If you're coming in sort of from the outside, they call it Origake Saumei, and outside of Samoa Bona, and just the really quite strict cultural differences. The good thing was, though, is it made me write more. The more I worked with students and had to provide stories or theatre pieces that I wanted to work with myself, I just would write stuff really quickly to be able to put it on stage and develop with the students. And then we sort of ended up with a community group, and yes, it's grown. It has grown, but it was quite difficult to get people to believe in us and what we're doing and what we do with the students, because we seemed quite happy-dippy la-la, I think, to them, to the locals. But we started getting there, and it was kind of time for me to come back. I was like, oh. But it's good. I'm not done with Samoa by any means. I needed to come home and refresh and reconnect with my babies. With my friends, with the industry, and do some creative, professional development for myself. After almost 10 years of teaching and coaching, and my husband and I over there, we went fully into production stuff, and so we had a casting house and helped do some casting for Disney, and worked for different films that came over from New Zealand, and it was a really amazing experience to be able to do that too.
Well, you're bringing with you, Fiona, though, also Alofa, which This is your baby also first performed, I think, 3 years ago in Samoa, and went to American Samoa also. And I thought, well, that's going to be very interesting for you. I suspect it's more often the other way. There's a play created here in New Zealand that can be taken to the islands. But starting this in Samoa, that must have been a big moment for you. That premiere night must have been a huge moment for you.
It was, It was quite major. We deal with some really strong themes in Alofa. And my original cast was an all-male cast. I sort of started learning after about 7 years of trying to produce work that was quite female-oriented stage-wise, that what I was trying to say wasn't really being heard by people I wanted to hear. And so I was like, cool then, I'll hop off the stage and put on 3 generations of male and tell the story about a female and how that affects this family, and they can tell the story and then hopefully people will start listening. And it worked over there. It worked. And Tuiasa Wele Sepetaya, who's the writer, wrote the role of Papa for him. Him and his partner are in the process of translating the whole play into Samoan so that they can tour it out to the villages and, take it to the schools and the theological schools, and, so that it can maybe filter through to the outer villages,
So that's a gift back, isn't it? You're gifting that back to Samoa, really.
It was amazing, because when I was first approached to come back home, and it was by very, very dear, close people to me, I was a little resistant inside, because I was kind of like, I felt like I hadn't done what I wanted to do, and I didn't quite know what that was, but I knew I wasn't. I just was like, I'm not ready to go back, because I haven't done it. And then we did one night after the show at this university conference, and as part of the audience there were quite a few Kiwis and a lot of Pacifics on the diaspora university level, come, and people got it, and men stood up and said, this, needs to stop, the gender violence. And so it sort of made an impact that made me feel like, okay, maybe I can go back home to New Zealand now and do some work there and be home. I forgot how much I love New Zealand. Seriously.
That's a really powerful moment for you, Fiona, as the creator of this play, to see men over there stand up and take that ownership. I mean, that's quite extraordinary, really, that sort of response. Beyond what you must have imagined, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We would do Q&As after the shows, because our people, they want the actors to come back. They don't care about breaking the fourth wall. They want to go, where are you from? Where's your village? They want to ask questions. So we just got used to doing that. After every show, you just come back out and then you're just yourself, but you're still in costume. I mean, I was a mess on stage, obviously. I was just like, yay. But I'm really happy to bring her home. I didn't even dream that we were going to bring Alofa here. I really didn't. I'd started working on my solo piece, which I'm wanting to put on stage next year. And I kind of thought, yep. And then it happened so organically and so beautifully, and I'll just put an application and see what happens. It's one of those ones.
I love the way you describe Alofa as she bringing your play home, because at the heart of this is Alofa. And what we haven't talked about yet is the story, and that's what we'll move to next.
There are 3 generations of the Sueloto family, and our matriarch Alofa she's passed on. And the son comes home after 25 years, reunites with the family, and then from that reunion, secrets and lies unfold, and there's a lot of forgiveness, needing forgiveness. There's a lot of love. It keeps going back to the matriarch and her teaching and the things that happened to her that, really affected the family.
And Nico is the eldest son who comes back, as I say, after 25 years. And I imagine that's we were talking about you coming home after 10 years. I imagine that's, 2.5 times. But when he comes back to Samoa, what does he encounter? I mean, I'm sure his home has changed and people's attitudes towards him perhaps have changed.
The first thing he encounters is his father. Males are such funny creatures, aren't they? with all respect, I say that. And I've got to be honest, I have enjoyed... This isn't quite to do with the play, but as a person, as a woman, as a 50-year-old woman who grew up very angry with men in general in my own culture, I'm really grateful to have been able to reconcile that. So, whilst I talk, we talk about stuff, I really hope that people who come and see the show realise that I am actually celebrating these men. So when Nico comes home, everyone's really flawed, really flawed, but everyone's looking for something and looking for peace, and each character finds it in a different way. That's really strong. Each person, each character's, it's their time. It's time. It's time to talk. It's time to tell your story. It's time to come home. So the first thing Nico encounters is his father and his father's wrath, really, his fury.
Things have happened for you that wouldn't had you stayed at home.
That's right. I wouldn't have, I just happened to be there, and Susi was making his film, The Orator, and I literally was just going to see Nathaniel. I was going to pop in and see Nathaniel leave because he was doing the auditions, and I'd read the brief, and they pretty much wanted they wanted Samoan-looking Samoans, which I don't have those. I don't typically have those looks, so it's quite difficult to be to go for auditions for as a Samoan because I don't have. I don't know. I just never get cast. I never get cast in those sorts of roles. But when I went to see Nathaniel was like, "Come on, then, come put one down." And I was like, "No, that's not. That's not what the brief was." So we did an audition. That was fine. Left it, and then I got that role. And had I been here in New Zealand, I doubt that I would have even sort of gotten an audition. Really. Wow. So being in Samoa, we wouldn't have gotten to work on Moana and have a big part of that in our lives. And me and Nasole, had we not had I not been in Samoa, it was an absolute blessing.
Fiona Collins.
You're listening to RNZ Pacific. Find us online at rnzi.com.
News at midnight. Morena, I'm Vicky Mackay. Good morning. A doctors' union says hospitals in some regions are regularly having to keep patients waiting outside in ambulances, a practice known as ambulance ramping. It happens when patients can't enter the emergency department until a bed is available and continue to be cared for by ambulance officers. The National Secretary of the Resident Doctors Association, Deborah Powell, says it's happening too often.
Certainly in the Waikato and Auckland regions, we are talking weekly, and, there are stretches of days at a time. In Auckland, we've had days at 200% occupancy in that day over the last 3 weeks.
Deborah Powell says she wants fewer excuses from the government and more resources for emergency departments. The Health Minister, David Clark, acknowledges there is an ambulance ramping problem, but says a health and disability sector review is underway. Hackers working for the US government are reported to have destroyed computer systems used by Iran's paramilitary force to plan attacks against oil tankers in the Gulf. Reports say significant damage was done to Iranian computer systems and military communications networks, some of which have been offline since the attack several weeks ago. The BBC's Peter Bowes reports.
The attack was designed to curb Iran's ability to covertly target shipping traffic in the Gulf, according to the New York Times. The newspaper, citing senior American officials, says it happened on June the 20th, the same day that President Trump called off a retaliatory airstrike after Iran shot down a US drone. Iran is reported to be still trying to restart some of the computer systems that were taken offline and to recover information destroyed in the attack.
Peter Bowes reporting. Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement's trying to organise a massive general strike across the territory next week. Huge anti-government demonstrations have taken place all summer, sparked by a controversial extradition bill and concerns over China's increasing influence. Here's the ABC's Greg Jennett.
If it can be organised, the demonstrators want school teachers, parents, some in the health sector, and the vitally important aviation industry to support a general strike on Monday, the day when Hong Kong's meant to formally end its summer break. The lead up to further protests this weekend. Tens of thousands gathered in the central area last night, highlighting what they claim is a litany of sexual violence against women perpetrated by police.
Greg Jennett in Hong Kong. Thailand's highest court has rejected an appeal by 2 migrant workers from Myanmar convicted of murdering 2 British tourists 5 years ago. The bodies of Hannah Witheridge and David Miller were found on a beach on the popular tourist island of Koh Tao in September of 2014. 23-year-old Miss Witheridge had been raped and bludgeoned to death, and 24-year-old Mr. Miller had suffered blows to his head. Zaw Lin and Windsor Tun were arrested soon after the killing and sentenced to death in December of 2015, although their supporters have claimed they were framed and that evidence was bungled. A Canterbury woman has admitted stealing from the Canterbury District Health Board. The Serious Fraud Office charged the former employee with 1 charge of false accounting. The Christchurch District Court was told yesterday the woman directed patients to pay for their treatments by putting the money into a bank account she controlled. She also kept some cash payments from patients for herself. The woman, who's been given interim name suppression, was remanded on bail to reappear in the same court later this year. A developer's contract clause preventing Wanaka subdivision residents from speaking out is being challenged in the High Court. North Lake's purchase and sale agreement prevents owners from submitting against any of the developer's plans and requires residents to give their unqualified approval if requested. When a controversial 113-room hotel in the subdivision was notified, residents were unable to make a submission against it. A lobby group for Wanaka communities supporting our North Lake neighbours says it filed papers in the High Court earlier this week. Its president, Neve Shaw, says residents have a democratic right to voice their opinion. To sport now, and the Black Caps have won their practice T20 match against the Sri Lankan, scored 11 by 33 runs. Sri Lanka scored 135 for 9 in their 20 overs. In reply, New Zealand were 168 for 6 in the rain-delayed match, giving them a victory of 33 runs ahead of the T20s against Sri Lanka starting on Sunday. And that's the latest in news and sport.